So I'm Susanne Gibbs, and I've homeschooled 4 children from starting. My oldest was in 8th grade, and my youngest was in kindergarten. And for several years, I homeschooled the oldest and the youngest. And for a couple of years into it, I realized it was a bit disruptive, having been fully involved in school and also doing homeschool with 2 children. So I decided to homeschool all 4 of them, and we had a wonderful time together. And I'm at the other end of it now, almost a decade and a half later. My oldest has graduated and has a job. My youngest is just now graduating high school, has had dual enrollment at a community college for the last year, and done a great job and had a wonderful time. Was well prepared, and yeah, that's about myself. I wrote this book with exactly a new homeschool parent in mind who might not feel comfortable, or who might be very eager to get started because there might be issues that need to be addressed that are problematic at school. I'm very honest. I'm listing my own questions that I had when I was starting my own homeschool journey. Um, and one of the most important topics is fear. The questions of, can I mess up my child? And I don't even know what to teach, and all these things. So that is very valid. I had that same fear, and that is not something that ever goes away, because every school year you have the same worries, and I address all that in my book. And so, yeah, I'm very honest about all that. One of the important things is, if you want to start homeschooling, obviously you have to know where to start. So understanding your questions, understanding your options, that gives you direction, and it gives you the courage. And if you understand that the fears can be conquered, and you don't have to worry, that there are so many possibilities, so many options available. It's difficult to know if you haven't really tried it out. But from experience, I've done several different options. There's online, I was the teacher. I had an online curriculum that I purchased. There's homeschool co-ops. So those are definitely things that will help alleviate the fear somewhat, because you feel like you're not alone. So then also, what does the day look like? Day-to-day activities, how do I teach? Those things I address in the book. And the typical thing, this is so stereotypical, but it's there. I don't know math. How am I going to do that, right? That's like a very common fear. There are so many ways to teach math where the parent doesn't have to be an expert. Parent doesn't necessarily even have to be the teacher, just the facilitator. Or the parent can be the teacher and learn alongside. So there's that, many options. So that is my main concern in this book, is to provide lots of options for the parent. It actually is quick start, even though it's kind of like this thick. It's like, is that a quick start? It actually is, if you think about the topic at hand, which is homeschooling. So that is sort of a big topic. So it's not like a 5-step little one piece of paper quick start, but it sort of is, because I think I have 7, I don't remember exactly, whatever, maybe 7 steps, how to start from beginning to end. What are the things that you have to think about, and decisions that you have to make? You can read this book over the course of a weekend. You can read it literally cover to cover very quickly. It's a quick read. And you will then be educated on every possibility that's out there that you should think about, starting at homeschool laws in your state. What are, in addition to that, what are the options of how do I teach? What do I teach? Why would I even homeschool? What are the reasons? What are the typical reasons to homeschool? Which is later on a question that I will address separately. But yeah, so a quick start is typically, right, give me step by step something that is quick and easy. And this book sort of fulfills that requirement of a quick start. But it's just because there are so many different topics that you have to think about that it's, there's lots of information that goes into it. But yeah, that is pretty much my goal, is to make it very streamlined, very easy to follow instructions. And then also, which is something that a lot of homeschool books that I have read don't have, this all-encompassing approach to not only give guidance on why to homeschool and how to homeschool, but also specifically what you can teach. So don't just tell me why and how to do it, but now what? What do I choose? What do I actually use as my curriculum, and how do I choose my curriculum? I talk about worldview. This also addressed that in another question, but there's just a lot of different things that go into it. But I address all of this in this book, in still having this quick start format of having a streamlined step-by-step guidance on how to do this. Yeah, so this, when I was thinking about these questions, this is the one thing that comes to my mind, is just the sheer amount of information. I have bought, when I started homeschooling, I bought, I don't know how many books, and each book was amazing and wonderful, and like I'm glad I own them. But there wasn't one book that addressed every question I had, which of course is unreasonable to kind of expect that one book offers the answers to all your questions. However, I kind of over the years kept record of my own questions and my own struggles and worries and all the things that flow into this homeschool animal that feels like kind of, oh my goodness, this wild beast that you have to tame. And so in my book, I actually address a ginormous range of topics that not just leading you through the steps, how to begin, but also one of the things I address is something that doesn't get much publicity anymore. It used to, is the idea of worldview. And so the thing is, when you're teaching middle schoolers, so this might start somewhere age 10 to 12, so like 5th grade-ish, something like that, kids really ask the question why. They begin to really want to know, not just give me, something to hands-on fun things, but they want to really understand. They have the why questions, not like the 3- and 4-year-old type why questions, everything is a why, but give me some logical explanation. Why is murder wrong? Why is it wrong to steal? Why can I not cheat on a test? These kind of ethical values that our society has, they really want to know the foundation. And if the parent isn't ready, or the teacher isn't ready to have an answer for this, it can really be a stressor in the relationship, in the homeschool. And this is actually a real blessing, to be able to have the parent be involved in these conversations, because these do happen. These conversations happen in public and private schools, but the parents aren't part of that. So this is actually one of the problems that arise having your child in a public or private school where you're not really there and you don't really know what exactly is the value that they're being taught. So this is something that can lead to amazing, wonderful conversations. It can lead to discussions. It can lead to arguments. So you have kind of got to be ready for that. Just you have to understand, the parent, the teacher has to understand that it's okay. You don't have to, this is not a one-time talk. If you disagree, if your child disagrees with you, it's okay. Let it slide. And that is actually a big like a big chapter that I wrote about this topic of worldview. And it's not something that you have to really worry about, but just be ready to address it when it arises. Have questions, have the answers, and expect the questions that your child might ask. I operate from a Christian worldview, but I offer various other worldviews, humanist worldview, atheist, there's so many worldviews out there. And, I'm a Christian. However, that doesn't mean everybody homeschooling will have that same worldview. So I do cover pretty much the main ones out there, and the questions that would be asked and the answers that could be given. So that is something to, I think, doesn't really matter what your worldview is. You'll find something in there to just think about your own worldview. That's all I'm really saying, and be ready for those questions. And then on top of that, what I kind of already said is I offer just the sheer amount of information I offer in the book. I have the way that I've written the book is hands-on and practical. So that is, in my opinion, not something that you find in any other book. I haven't really found one that offers the variety of information. And then there's lots of practical and hands-on and resources that I recommend at the end of each chapter that are very helpful. This is a reason why logic should be taught, because and rhetoric, but like the classical type teaching approach includes logic and rhetoric, and the logic the subject logic will actually teach children how to think, how to ask questions, and worldview is going to be part of that, because you can't really get around learning any like history and science and all these amazing discoveries without understanding a basic foundation of ethics, because everything that you pretty much learn in history has some sort of value system attached to it. Wars, right? Why is this war fought? Why was World War I, World War II, or Civil War, any kind of war or any kind of scientific discovery and the implications for the future use of certain things? Vaccinations, right? Well, why do we care about vaccines? Because we value life. Why don't we just get, who cares, right? We could just like all die. Why don't we want that? Well, there's a value there that life is precious. So it's just these kinds of basic thoughts that I think are important to teach our children so that they can carry those on. I actually, before I wrote this down, my answers, I kind of did a search on the current state as far as how does the United States compare to other countries. Like, just, I'm from Germany, so I like the international kind of view of things. And the United States is like not at the end, not the worst, not the best, sort of kind of average, right? And the question is, why is that? Why isn't the United States further ahead? That is just that mind-boggling. And I'm not saying that we should be the best everywhere and stuff like that, but we certainly have the it's a possibility. Why not? What is going wrong? Why are we just average and actually below average in several, like in math, I think we're the worst. Science is like the STEM. I think that's improving overall. But but I think one of the problems is actually, well, the worldview, I think, is becoming a big issue, because I think our society, the values our society has currently that are being infiltrated into the classroom in the public and even private schools is very distracting to academic learning. It's just so distracting that we're paying so much attention to emotions and to teaching children that it's okay to be whoever they want to, which is fine, but there's a limit. And so that is just very distracting, and I think it takes away from productive classroom time. If you talk to I have a lot of teacher friends, and a lot of them say the main thing that they deal with during classroom time is just logistics, like just like the keeping the classroom in line, and it's not actually teaching. So whatever they do, it's teaching is secondary. And when that's kind of a problem. So I do believe that homeschooling, while it's not the solution for everybody, there are a lot of parents that would be it would be very useful for them to homeschool their children. It would be very helpful for them to have this input, and it actually enriches family life too, because if you think about it, many families are never seeing each other because, well, there's extracurricular stuff. Now, I'm not saying that homeschool kids won't have extracurricular stuff. You can be homeschooling and be just as busy. It's very possible. Like, actually, we went through my family. We were very busy, and then we had to pull back because you can't say yes to everything. But it is even harder when your kid is in school because you don't see your child from, I don't know, 7:30 or something, 7 o'clock in the morning to 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then you have extracurricular activity and homework and whatever else. Dinner is very difficult to eat together as a family. So there's not so much family time. So that is, I think, actually one of the best, the blessings that come out of homeschooling is being able to have more family time. And I think that even if that's the only thing that comes out of your homeschool, I mean, obviously your kids will probably excel, but even if they don't, if they're just sort of like average, at least they have the family time, which is a huge, huge benefit. That is so huge, people don't even understand. Having family time, how important that is to children and to the formation of their character, to the formation of who they are as a person. I personally started homeschooling because I thought that my kids wanted to have, my oldest son had a interest in certain things, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to teach him at home, because this way we can really, and that's another question later on, but this is something where I can help him excel in an area that he really, really loved, which wasn't really helping in school because they weren't putting much emphasis on this. But that's one of the reasons. So I have actually a long list of here, some common reasons for homeschool. That's actually in my chapter on why homeschool, the very beginning of the book. So number one, parents are responsible for their children's education. So my opinion, and I think that's generally a foundation in society, is that parents should raise their own children. Don't give your child to somebody else to raise, unless you are disabled or you have some issue, right? But like generally the parent should be in charge of their own child. And if they choose to give their child to a school to be educated, there's nothing wrong with that if the parent still knows that they're ultimately in charge, and so they should be involved and they should be understanding what's going on in the school. So there's nothing wrong. Like, there's been many wonderful people educated in schools, and usually the common factor is that the parents were involved in what's going on at the school. They knew kind of the teacher, they knew what's going on in the classroom, and they had some sort of involvement at some level. So that's one reason. Yeah, parents should be involved. Number two, there could be safety concerns that parents choose to homeschool their children because, well, there's unsafe environment stuff going on at schools, shootings and bullying and sexual content, and it's not safe for a lot of kids. They feel very unsafe, so start homeschooling. That's totally a reason. Then the moral instruction, that kind of goes hand in hand with where kids might not feel safe. I mean, I personally would like to know what my child learns. If I'm not in the classroom, I don't know what the moral lesson is that comes along with each subject. And believe it or not, every subject has some sort of moral attached to it. So it's just something that happens. It's the same thing, the worldview again, right? That's why that's such a, in my opinion, a really big deal to think about it. Let's say you move to another area and your child was in school, but now you're moving to an area and there isn't a school that fits you or your child's, what you were hoping for. That's a reason to homeschool. People choose to homeschool for that reason. And then they just want to homeschool because they just like to do it. They would like to just homeschool. So that's definitely a reason. And then special needs. I have actually personally a little bit of experience helping out with a special needs child. And so I devote quite a bit of time in my book to address that. What would be some options, some ideas? That is a very difficult situation, but it could possibly make your life easier if you take that on. But then you would have to make that choice and evaluate and see if that's really the best for you and your child. So there are so many different factors to think about, but special needs is definitely something I address. My goal in this book was that you could read a chapter, and then at the end of the chapter, so I basically build the chapter so that you can read it and kind of go deeper into whatever the topic is that I'm covering in that chapter. And at the end of each chapter, I list resources and recommendations, things that I have personally used, tried out, and that I have personally found helpful. You don't have to necessarily read the entire chapter. You can literally read the first paragraph and say, you know what, that sounds good or bad, or I don't know. Go to the recommendations and check it out and see what you think. And so that is kind of how I think. I think my brain works where give me the information. I just want the bare information. I don't want to have like all the pros and cons necessarily. Now, I do add them in because not everybody thinks like me, but you can just kind of skim over it and jump to the end and look at my recommendations. And that includes every single subject. I think I covered like every subject that's possibly could be ever taught. So I have multiple teaching methods, and with each teaching method comes a set of subjects that make sense with it. For instance, if you choose classical education, logic and rhetoric would be, and Latin and Greek and those kinds of classical languages are sort of part of that educational philosophy. So I talk about Latin and Greek and other foreign languages that would help build on that and help you get your classical education going. But let's say you are more Charlotte Mason. That is a different teaching approach that also could use logic, rhetoric, and Greek and Latin and all that. You can also put that in there. But it also includes picture study and nature study and a whole bunch of subjects that aren't really in other philosophies that's kind of unique to Charlotte Mason. So I kind of list all that stuff so that you can, what I personally did was my style was I took the best of everything that I liked and put it all together. So I was eclectic is what that is called, right? So I was classical, and then I really liked the idea of nature study. So I put that in there, and then I used some other stuff, and I just put it all together. So it's a jumble of stuff that I personally use. And you can do that because what I basically have written the book in a way where you can then go to the end of, so I have a chapter, for instance, on, let's say, foreign languages, right? And I list all the foreign languages. Since I'm a native German, I have ideas of how to teach German. So I add that in there if the reader is interested in teaching their child German. Now, a lot of people are interested in learning Spanish, right? So I add some Spanish stuff that basically the same people that have German stuff available also have Spanish and French. And so I just took kind of that stuff and added it into the book as well, some French stuff. But my point is that each chapter has this kind of pattern where I give kind of broad information and then kind of different viewpoints, perspectives. Why should we teach this subject? What is important about history? Why should I teach history? Should we just scrap history and forget about it, right? And so I share a little bit of my personal story about I grew up in Berlin before the wall fell. And so I kind of put in a little bit of like my own experiences, and it helped me kind of digest a little bit of my own background in why certain subjects and why certain topics are interesting to me and why I have red flags somewhere, anyway. But so I also addressed a little bit in that, I think it's in the history chapter, on everybody has their own unique history, like where you grew up and what cultural influences you've had in your own life. Bring that into your homeschool. Make that a thing. That is really, really rich. That is who you are, and that should be passed on to your children so they appreciate that. So I add this kind of stuff into the chapters, and in my opinion, having a all-around enrichment or enriched environment in which you are very intentional about including things, it's just not just about I'm doing math and English. That's important, but like that's not homeschooling, right? You want to be realistic and you put in all kinds of stuff in there. So I have that in there. So in my opinion, when you read this book, you have a really good idea of what you're getting yourself into, and I think you get excited about and then I think that is the most important thing a new homeschooling parent needs, is have a vision and be excited about what they're getting themselves into, not feel a burden of, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail. This is not going to be good. I'm going to ruin my child. No, it's the opposite. You want to be excited. You want to look at all the possibilities. It's so amazing what you can do, what you can cover, and how creative you can be. Some people have more interest in that, some people less. They're like, just tell me what to do. Well, you know what? Tell me what to do. That's exactly what this book is. If you just want to like go to the end of each chapter and say, just tell me what to do, you can totally do that. Because I have one part in the book, it just tells you what to do. Like, just choose these things. If you just do that, it takes you like 5 minutes, or go through it, order the stuff, and you're set. Like, that's the tell me what to do people. And sometimes that's exactly who I am. I'm just tell me what to do. I don't want to think about it. Just tell me what to get. If it's not terrible, I'm for it. Just give me something that works and that somebody has used and they've had success with it. Tell me what to do. I'll do it. So that is, my book has that aspect as well. So, and then it's for those people who like, you know what, I really want to know, why am I doing this? What should I be thinking about? I want all the details, all the minutia. Well, then read the whole chapter. Think about it. Go to all the resources I list and do your research, because I also enjoy that. I like to do research and all that stuff. So it's sort of like, I hope it works for a wide variety of personalities of parents who would like to tell me what to do or who would like to research. So that is kind of my approach. So number one, actually, most parents that live with their child, right, they kind of know what the bent of their child is. They kind of know a little bit about what their natural talents are, their natural strengths and weaknesses, which is actually at the same time can be tricky, because parents tend to, because we love our children so much, we want them to be the best in everything. And well, they aren't, obviously. We're human, right? And so you can't be good at everything. Most people aren't. So it's difficult sometimes to navigate this fine line between wanting to improve our children's maybe weaknesses, but it can lead to only focusing on the weaknesses and being not, being dissatisfied that they are not able to do whatever, math or whatever it would be. So we just have to be careful about that. But generally, parents kind of know, okay, my oldest son, the reason we started homeschooling is he was so interested in reading. This sounds so almost crazy, but he was super interested in reading books of like philosophical value. He was very much into worldview. This is why I am so onto this topic of worldview, because my oldest son was just super interested in that. And so the school that he went to was a private school, and they did a lot of that, but they just didn't do enough of it, that it wasn't, he just craved that so much. So we decided that we would just focus on a lot of that. That's why we did the classical education. So I knew that that was his interest. And so we very much focused on that. Now, my other son, who came after him, he was also like that. He was also very into, both of my two oldest boys, they were very interested in history, in just the connection of these battles, and they just loved arguing with the worldview and the reasons for this and that, and logic and rhetoric and all that kind of stuff. And then my girls came along and they were not as much into it. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That is, I don't know. I guess they're not as, I don't know. What do I do now, right? I had to that's when I switched my approach to Charlotte Mason, because the classical system worked for them as well, but they really were interested in more hands-on science, STEM kind of stuff. And it's just, you learn to nurture your child and try out a few different things. So it's like Charlotte Mason, I think her name is Sonia Schaefer, whom I quote actually a bunch of times. She calls it spreading the feast. I think that's a very Charlotte Mason term. Having a feast, and you basically set the table with like everything that's possibly available, food-wise, and then let your child choose. And chances are they're going to choose some sweet stuff, some salty stuff, some, some like steak or meat or something in the potatoes, like the rich stuff. But if you always set the table with all the good stuff that's out there, they're going to gravitate toward the good stuff. Don't just give them the sugar and the dessert and stuff like that, but you give them, a good selection. And so that is what I then started doing with my girls, and they just had a different, I mean, I did that with my boys too, but I wasn't really so much aware of the Charlotte Mason. So the richness, the amount of subjects I taught to my girls probably were greater than, and it wasn't like subjects, they were like nature study. I mean, so you could call that a subject, or it's just, they're called enrichment studies. So the subject I call enrichment studies encompasses like 6 or 7 different areas, like nature study and poetry and art and just various, Shakespeare is like one whole thing. And and then handicrafts. My boys were really into doing stuff with their hands, but it wasn't like crocheting or something. It was more like, give me a knife and some wood and I will do something, or give me a hammer and whatever tool stuff. My girls were more into, painting and kind of also hands-on stuff, but just a little differently interested. So as a homeschool parent, what you can do is, if you're not 100% sure how to nurture your child's interest, just try out different things and see what they're interested in. What is it that they naturally gravitate toward and where they're naturally excelling? And then just offer that and let them go as fast as they want to, without losing the depth, right? Don't let them just skim through the book and then call it done. Like, should have a little bit of depth. But that is definitely a good way of doing it, is to just offer the subjects, the different ways that they're taught. There's also there are different approaches to teaching, for instance, science, right? There's a Charlotte Mason way of teaching science, and then there's a very traditional way of teaching science. So if the difference is the textbook style. When you read the kind of Charlotte Mason approach, is more like narrative textbook. The child can literally read it, and it's at kind of a lower level, so the child can actually read the textbook and it's like somebody explaining it to them, versus a textbook that's like a, very academically written. Like, nobody wants to read that, right? I mean, that is really, but some people want to read that. Some people, that's how their brain works, right? So I'm not trying to put somebody on the spot and say, but some people think like that, and then use that. That's fine. But you can try things out. I recommend trying that as early as kindergarten, first grade, whatever. And here's what in my opinion, actually, Charlotte Mason and classical, those are the approaches that I personally have used. And they are very, very similar in the early years. But the only difference is in the classical approach, there is a lot of memorization going on. And the reason, the reason for that is that you can take that to the extreme and make it really boring. But think about it. When you have a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old and you tell them one thing 2 times, they have got it memorized. They're just such sponges. It's unbelievable how much they can, how quickly they memorize songs. And so the classical model takes that into account and builds on that, and basically you have all these memory songs, right? Which my kids, they have all these memory songs that they still sing them today, right? So they have all these timelines memorized, and this is not to say in Charlotte Mason you can't do that. So that's why I'm like, okay. But on the other hand, Charlotte Mason was more of a, let the child be the leader, let the child be the guide. And most children don't necessarily go and want to hear a song on their own and say, Mom, can you turn that on? So Charlotte Mason is more like, don't influence your child's desires, how they want to learn too much. Where the classical model says, well, you should actually tell them what to learn, because otherwise they're not going to memorize anything. So that's where I took the classical model. In my opinion, I preferred that part of memorization. And here, for instance, Latin vocabulary, some maybe Greek vocabulary. My kids learned that as a first, second, third grader. I had these memory songs. To this day, they know the vocabulary, because the songs were just so easy to memorize, and they would stick with you. And so you just have that in your head, right? But yeah, that is a good question. So I would recommend starting sooner, but then it will turn out as your kid gets older, which method really works for them best. And it may be all of them kind of mixed together, or because classical model is very rigorous, but my older son and my two, I mean, all my kids were pretty rigorous, but my older son and my second son, they were just like, wow, they really wanted, they read all those books and they loved it. And my girls, they love to read, but they just didn't love to read those books. They love to read other books. And so that was just the difference, you know. But yeah, I think you can start experimenting at any age. And as they get older, you will probably zoom in on one and say, you know, this works really, really well. My child just goes with that. That's just how he or she thinks. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. You know, there are so many parents who think they just can't do it. Like I've taught, every time I talk to somebody and they're like, I don't know how you did it. How did you homeschool and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not that smart. I mean, I know a lot of things, but the reason I know a lot of things is because I've homeschooled for so many years. Eventually, you just know these things, right? Like in math, I was not very good in math when I was younger, but I've taught 4 children, you know, calculus now. So, I mean, I like it. Now I'm like, I like it. You know, I didn't like it with my first child. I really didn't. So, but it's just because I've done it. Like if you teach algebra and geometry so many times, eventually you just know it, right? So people know me now and they think I'm so smart. Well, I really, when I started homeschooling, I knew it's nothing. I knew nothing. I mean, I knew my high school stuff and college stuff, and that was not that great. You know, I was just like anybody else. And I've just learned so much with my kids that now I feel like, oh my gosh, I benefited maybe more than they have because wow, all the things I've learned. But and then I was able to write a book, right? But you know, I might sound really smart, but I wasn't when I started homeschooling. I was just like anybody else, and I was afraid, and I was like, I don't know anything. How do I do this, right? And I just found resources, and I had to look on my own. It was really hard. I mean, it took me forever, and that's why I wrote this book, is because I thought, you know what, I'm gonna put all my resources that I found over the years together, and they're just great. Like I love the things that I found. Really written to the parent who thinks they cannot do it. You know, I'm trying to really encourage them. If you want to do it, you can do it. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it, right? But if you want to do it, there's a way. It's totally possible. It's actually very likely that you succeed because you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then, you know, then don't do it. It's okay. Nobody judges you for it. But anyway, or if you don't want to do it yet, you know, you may read the book and say, I'll start homeschooling in 2 or 3 years. But at least now you know kind of what you should know.